Welcome into the Awesemo MMA Strategy Show. Here to get you ready for UFC Vegas number 44, which goes down on Saturday night. Start time 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Main card 10 p.m. Eastern time. Headlined by Rob Font. Taking on Jose Aldo. Key matchup here in the bantamweight division. We are sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. Later on in the show, we'll talk about some of the Monkey Knife Fight plays we like for Saturday's UFC Vegas number 44. Hopefully everyone had a great Thanksgiving week, a week off for us here on the MMA team here, but we are back at it. My guy Pete kicking that NBA knowledge.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What's up, Jason? Missed you. Missed talking about some fights. Hope everybody had a great holiday. Now we get back to it with a very, very exciting card. Tons of fights, tons of volatility. So can't wait to discuss it with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things you look at this fight card, underdogs are really what we're sticking out there this week. And me and Pete were talking right before the show. This is one of those weeks where you could potentially have a lot of money left on the table. Of course, as we do this show, we don't know what the FanDuel salaries are. We do have the DraftKings salaries out there, but that was kind of like my big takeaway as I was putting together my spreadsheet of the salaries, Pete, was simply of like, man, there are some fighters here where there are multiple places we can save on salary this week.
Yeah, for sure. I don't feel funny if you have thousands of dollars left on the table. Honestly, like this is going to be underdog city, or at least a ton of underdogs have the opportunity to come through more so than other cards. And with 15 fights, this seems like a crazy GPP week that could definitely be helped by the use of groups on Fantasy Cruncher, trying to target certain and specific matchups. I think that's one way to really narrow down your field and try to get the right combinations. But overall, it's going to be a crazy week.
Of course, main event, Rob Font taking on Jose Aldo. Rob Font, the slight favorite in this one. He's 8,400 over on DraftKings. Jose Aldo, 7,800. Of course, we're both familiar with Rob Font. Of course, Rob trained up there in Northeast. He went to school down here in my hometown of Tampa, Florida. And, look, the thing I think about Rob Font is I think about boxing. But looking at it from the Jose Aldo side of the equation in this one, and look, I don't think this is necessarily a must roster potential fight. It just depending on how it goes. But if I'm Jose Aldo, I think the game plan has got to be the pressure fighter, force Rob Font on his heels, and also threaten with grappling and his jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I think that's a definite path to victory for Jose Aldo, is just mixing it up, not staying in the pocket and allowing Rob Font's jab to start to get to work. Because once Rob Font really starts to build some momentum, you start to see that exceptional striking. And that's what Rob's going to want to do. He's going to want to dictate the striking, be very careful of the counters, stuff the wrestling attempts. It's going to be a lot more difficult than I think a lot of people are imagining. I think this is a very, very close fight. If you want to roster Jose Aldo, by all means, I have no problem against that at all. I think that he's one of the best fighters ever. And you're talking about a fighter that's probably a little bit more well-rounded than Rob Font. Rob Font is more of a specialist in the striking department, whereas Jose Aldo can mix things up and look to implement some jiu-jitsu, which is definitely there. It's just who's on the upward trajectory and who is on the downward, and I would say that Jose Aldo's best days are possibly behind him. And I do think that Rob Font is starting to really, build off that momentum and come into his own. Again, with all that being said, this is just a very, very slight lean to me that I think that Rob Font can get it done in the decision. You talked about it and we discussed it about how 5-round nature, if it goes the distance, makes me want to think that maybe Rob Font can outpoint him over the course of 25 minutes. So it's a very, very close fight. I don't know if it's going to be a part of the optimal lineup just because there's going to be so many different variations and crazy high point totals, but I will slightly lean towards Rob Font.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are going to look at that fight that Rob Font had against Cody Garbrandt, where he landed 176 significant strikes in that one. That is something to pay attention to in terms of that one. Of course, Rob obviously, that jab that he has is one of the better jabs there in the UFC. And one of the things I do like that Rob Font's been in Vegas for like 3 weeks. Yeah, him and the New England Cartel. I saw it last week. They were there prior to Thanksgiving, and I like that. The fact of they've pretty much as a team have isolated themselves in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like the preparation. I like how they're isolated out there. They're ready, acclimated, even though it's it's not like you're fighting at like crazy elevation or anything like that. But I do just think it's good for the mindset, like getting into, the war room with your teammates, and Calvin Kattar, your main training partner and sparring partner. And Calvin Kattar's a big guy, and it surprises me that he can make featherweight. So when everybody's saying, how Jose Aldo used to be, a featherweight, and he's going to be so much stronger than Rob Font, I do think that he will be stronger than Rob Font, but Rob deals with Calvin Kattar on the daily. So I think that it's going to help him in the preparation, and I can't wait to see the fight.
Tom Pags, another guy, part of that team, a name to remember. He took a short notice fight that didn't go his way, but he's that new part of that New England cartel to pay attention to there. Of course, this is the Also MMA Strategy Show. Of course, I appreciate it. Be sure to give also a like right here on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you know when a new show is live here on the channel. Of course, coming up after us will be the NHL Strategy Show. And of course, later on today, we got you covered for your NFL and NBA coverage. And if you're not a member of Awesemo Plus and you want to get a peek what's behind the paywall, today's free premium data and tools over awesemo.com. Our Thursday night football top plays, NBA player rankings, and NHL top stacks. So check that out. Also, we'll talk to you about a promo we got going on here for the MMA Strategy Show later on here in the show. Let's move on to the co-main event, as we've got a matchup of two guys who are very familiar with each other, Brad Riddell and Rafael Fiziev. 7,900 for Brad Riddell, 8,300 for Fiziev here. And this is one of those ones where, and Pete, we were talking this before the show, like, I think this is a fight that's likely going to hit the third round. Brad Riddell, I mean, I think the question is, can you take one of the first two rounds? If not, because I do have some concerns about Rafael in the third round in terms of his cardio.
Yeah, so these guys are former training partners, and both are coaches at Tiger Muay Thai. Ever since that, they've moved on. You have Rafael Fiziev, a part of Sanford MMA, and Brad Riddell, mixing in work with City Kickboxing and everything. So you have two incredible strikers in this matchup, where Rafael Fiziev is definitely the more explosive and powerful of the two, where Brad Riddell has probably the toughness and volume edge. No, I shouldn't say volume. I should say 3-round cardio with good output throughout the entire 15 minutes. Rafael Fiziev looks great early on. Round 1 and round 2 is extremely dangerous, but he does somewhat fall off a cliff in round 3. My worry with this is how they're both going to nullify each other so much. It's going to be like a mirror match. And when fighters, it happens in New England a lot, when fighters train with each other for so long over the years, they know each other so well, it tends to be a boring fight. I don't think it's going to be a boring fight, but I feel like it's going to be a very calculated fight, which could not result in good scoring for DFS. I mean, you can make a case for either one of these guys. I do think that Rafael Fiziev, his explosiveness and power could do enough in the early going to really get the fight in his favor. I don't really see him finishing Brad Riddell, but I do agree with you thinking that he can somewhat bank 2 rounds. It's just a matter of, can he survive a third round onslaught from Brad Riddell? It's a close fight, but I am siding with Rafael Fiziev. Again, I'm a little bit worried that them knowing each other so well doesn't result in the best points.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things, and we've seen it so many times, Peter, of two guys who have, or ladies that have worked together in the past, that sometimes it doesn't always equal the best fight. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it's, each other. If you got caught or you got destroyed in one aspect, their strengths, their weaknesses. And I could see it where if this was a mismatch of skill, where it's like, yeah, they know each other, but one of them has horrible grappling and horrible submission defense. Well, I would probably lean towards the fighter that has the better overall wrestling in that. But these guys are very, very evenly matched. And I think that it's going to be, contested throughout the 15 minutes. And I can't wait to watch it. It's much more of a sit back and enjoy the fight rather than, bank on it for your DFS lineups.
Got a comment over on YouTube. Riddell easily fight of the night. Him versus Drew Dober was effing insane. I mean, look, I think from just a combat sports fan, this should be a fun fight to watch. But I just don't know when we're talking about GPPs. I just don't know if this is a fight that finds its way into the optimal lineup.
There's so many fights, right? Like, you have to prioritize in order to really narrow down the field and get to certain fights that you have that 100+ potential. If somebody's going to get a finish, I would like to think it's Rafael Fiziev at 8,300, which would be an absolute steal, but I don't foresee a finish coming. And I think it's going to be a 15-minute decision in a close one.
Next up, we got light heavyweights. Jimmy Crute taking on Jamahal Hill. Jimmy Crute 9,200. Jamahal Hill 7,000. Of course, both these guys coming off fights where they lost essentially due to injury. Jamahal Hill clearly he's not going to tap, no question about it. And Jimmy Crute, he'll go out there and fight on one leg. I think we all remember kind of that dead leg that he had as a referee's like, no, walk towards me. And referee's like, yeah, I'm not going to let you go out there. But like for me, break the fight down was not really difficult for me, Pete, because my thought is for Jimmy Crute, it's about utilizing your wrestling. If you're Jamahal Hill, it's about, keeping your distance and also having better fight IQ, which we did not see in his fight against Paul Craig.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fight IQ for both of these fighters is somewhat absent and probably their weakest link. Jimmy Crute has that grappling pedigree and that grappling potential. Jamahal Hill has that exceptional striking from distance, good volume, just good striking overall. And I can see this making its way into the optimal lineup. Like I would much rather target this volatile matchup where I think it could end up being one-way traffic for either one of these fighters. Jimmy Crute at 9,200, you're really hoping that he can get the fight to the mat. I think that if he does get the fight to the mat, he has an extreme advantage over Jamahal Hill, who, doesn't have the best jiu-jitsu and clearly showed that his fight IQ on the mat is something to be worried about because against Paul Craig, that arm was gross. It just got completely mangled. And Jimmy Crute can find submissions against some very, very talented fighters. I mean, he has a submission win over Olashaychuk, actually has a submission win over Paul Craig. So if he can get top position and get the takedown, you like him here at 9,200. My question is, does he decide to use his wrestling, right? And this is the thing about MMA DFS. It's not like, in NBA DFS where how certain players are going to go out there and perform or fall into stats. This is a matter of game plans and executing the game plans. And you just have to be correct on who's going to execute on what night. Jamahal Hill could easily win this fight. This is clearly one of my favorite GPP fights to target. I will ever so slightly lean towards Jimmy Crute at 9,200 that the fight ends up on the mat and he ends up getting it done. But Jamahal Hill, easily one of the best, underdogs on the slate.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's underdogs throughout this card that you can point to and say, let me go with that guy. Let me go with this guy. The price point Jimmy Crute does scare me a little bit at 9,200. But, the one thing, I can't get the thought process of Jamahal Hill escapes one submission for Paul Craig.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, all you got to do is break away. But he goes right back into the guard. And that's the thing that kind of scares me about Jamahal Hill.
Yeah, well, if you're an aggressive fighter, you want to try to ground and pound your opponent as much as possible, especially when you're a very good striker. You'll see that a lot of amazing strikers have good ground and pound if they're in top position. So that's when they get a little bit overzealous. It's happened to me in the past, and you get submitted because of it. Jamahal Hill, if he has the correct game plan with an adjusted skill set, I think that he can go out there and make light work of Jimmy Crute, because Jamahal Hill's striking in the UFC, it looked absolutely amazing. It's a volatile matchup. I'm going to set a group. I'm not really going to care who I'm going to get. I just want to make sure I get one of these guys in my lineup.
No doubt about it. Mentioned a question from the chat about FanDuel. Of course, as we're doing this show, FanDuel salaries have not been released, but asking what do we think about FanDuel removing takedown defense fantasy points. I was not a huge fan of it because that's actually like one of the reasons why I love to play over on FanDuel, because I thought it made their game different, and also it allowed you, those fighters who may been, had a salary of like $8, $9, $10, $11, they sit there and said, hey, they're going to have to stop takedowns. So it kind of made roster construction easier, but it's no longer there. And, I always have to think about that when I'm making FanDuel rosters now, to say, Jason, that's not there. You can't put that into consideration.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it made the platform different. I thought that the scoring system was neat. But it's not the case anymore. And it's I don't know. I don't know why they decided to change it, but they did.
Next up, we got Clay Guida taking on Leonardo Santos, the 41-year-old Leonardo Santos, a BJJ whiz. He's 8,800, 7,400 for Clay Guida. And every time I think about this fight, I just see Clay Guida getting submitted via guillotine off a sloppy shot.
It can happen. And I'll tell you what, when I was training out in New Mexico, Clay Guida in the practice room, obviously it's practice, but he falls into submissions a lot. And I remember that's when he was fighting Anthony Pettis. And I think everybody a part of the gym, minus a few people, were really worried because Pettis has amazing striking. He's better striking than Clay Guida, and he has excellent jiu-jitsu off of his back. But, hindsight 2020, Clay Guida went out there and just completely wrestled them and showed that if he can avoid some submissions, he can definitely win from top position and just solidifying rounds. But he does find himself into submissions in the past and pretty frequently. So I think that Santos is a nice value at 8,800. A little pricey, but I also think it's warranted because of the upside and the fact of Clay Guida's submission defense is somewhat lacking at times. Santos, I could see a guillotine or a triangle happening because you know that Clay Guida, he'll probably strike until he gets cracked and then he'll resort to his wrestling, which is kind of just like his second nature. And when that happens, I think that the slick Santos can end up finding the submission win here. And it's insane value for betting. If you want to bet Leonardo Santos via submission, I would definitely target that now. Clay Guida at 7,400. I can see why a lot of people want to get to him because of his pace, his pressure, his volume, and just activity in the cage in hopes that he can win a decision. But you're going to need 100 points from, I would say, everybody on this card in order to make it into the optimal lineup. And I can see that happening for Santos a little bit more than I can see that happening for Clay Guida.
Plus 350, Leo Santos to win via submission. Yeah, I would say you probably want to get on that one now before that line goes down later on in the week. Next up, we got a matchup between Brendan Allen and Chris Curtis. Brendan Allen, 9,600. Chris Curtis,
crazy,
6,600. I remember when I looked at the betting odds earlier this week, Pete, my first thought was like, whoo, man, that's a big line on Brendan Allen. I mean, look, I think he should be the favorite in this one, no question. I think the line's a little high on this one. You know, I had a question on Twitter earlier today in relation to, and Brendan Allen's name was brought up, basically saying, you know, in terms of, and this was from at St. Nick Foles says, "Hey Jason, is there any lock this week? Brendan Allen card is so tough." I don't think there's a lock this week. I think there's a lot of fights that I think are just super close in this one. What concerns me on Brendan Allen is Chris Curtis is durable. Now, look, he's not an 85er. He's really a 70er. And Chris does tend to get off the slow starts. And you saw that against Phil Hawes, which he talked about after the fact that was part of his game plan. He wanted to wear down Phil Hawes in that one. You know, in terms of GPPs, I want to get a sprinkle of Chris Curtis.
Yeah, I think that the price tag on Brendan Allen's crazy. Like 9,600 versus 6,600. It's just forcing my hand to get to some Chris Curtis because of the skill set that we know he possesses. And he went out there and got that amazing win over Phil Hawes the last time out. And at 6,800, he scored 109 fantasy points and, you know, basically led Phil Hawes into a big shot and then followed up. And it was just an absolute excellent performance for him. And his record overall is 27-8. The guy is extremely skilled, mainly likes to strike, but has some solid takedown defense. The pricing is what's really forcing my hand. 6,600 is just absolutely too cheap, and 9,600 is a little too much for the skill set of Chris Curtis. Like, I think Brendan Allen wins this fight. I do think Brendan Allen wins this fight, but does he perform insanely well at 9,600? He would need tons of takedowns or an early finish to really pay off that price tag, because if he doesn't get you over 110 points, he's a bust. I don't know in relation to the rest of the fighters on the card that I can say with confidence he gets over 110 points more than some of these other 9,000 fighters. So I'm going to not fade Brendan Allen, but I'm going to be significantly underweight to him. And like I said, Chris Curtis is going to be in my long shot pool because I know that power he has. I don't like the matchup for him. I think that the UFC really isn't doing him any favors by pairing him up with Phil Hawes. Yes. You know, chinny guy with suspect cardio, and now turning around and fighting Brendan Allen, I think is a much more difficult fight for him. And fighting a 17-4 Brendan Allen is not an easy fight, but he should end up walking away victorious. But like I said, tread carefully with this one.
Yeah, it's one of those. I was just pulled the DraftKings app, and let's just say you wanted to pair Chris Curtis with a Jamahal Hill.
Yeah, you
can literally get whoever else you want.
Yeah. Salary doesn't exist this week. Just don't even look at it. Don't make if I spend the remaining 400 or 500, I can get to don't even think about that. If you like however many fighters, 6 fighters, just lock them in your lineups, get them in your lineups. So ignore that green salary. Just totally ignore it.
But you made a great point a little bit earlier. You're going to need 6 fighters to all get 100 points.
Oh, 100%. I think we could be looking at what do you think the optimal score is going to be this week? 800?
The low end 725.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you can't have a decision win. And I mean, unless it's like a complete Hamza Shemaya Molly Whopping.
Maybe a Rob Font, Jose Aldo decision win.
I don't know. I mean, you would need a lot to happen.
Rob does get hit a lot.
He does. But I'm saying, like, it'd be one thing if you had a Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman or something like that, where they have grappling. When you have two strikers, it's kind of like for 25 minutes, I'm not really thinking it's going to make it into the optimal over 50%.
Yeah, I know, but it's a great comment Pete brought up. As we're developing our lineups, that's got to be the mentality, and that's where you really got to look at this fight card. And I'll tell you what I do is I start highlighting fights that I go, this is a GPP fight. This is a fight that's likely going to end via a finish. Now, when you want to get all the great data and tools we have over Awesemo.com, it's got to sign up for Awesemo weekly pass for $29.95. Gives you full access to everything we have over there at Awesemo.com. And we do got a special promo going on during this show. Use the promo code MMA Strategy Show. That's all word, all caps, MMA Strategy Show for 25% off your first week of Also Plus Platinum. And if you're just looking for Awesemo MMA weekly pass, you get those as low as $2.95 weekly. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Of course, when it comes to our MMA product, the thing that I always go to is that Top Fighter tool, because typically the way it works is, and we get done with this show, I started looking at our Top Fire tool. I think about how Pete has swayed me one way or the other. Then I submit my pro plays that is a part of the Also Plus premium membership over there. Sometimes Pete can sway my memory. I will tell you later on the show, there's a fight that I basically told Pete before in our pre-show meeting. Can you talk me off this guy? We'll talk about that matchup here a little bit later on. Next up, we got Alex Morono taking on Mickey Gall. Alex Morono, 9,500. Mickey Gall, 6,700. I was talking to one of Alex Morono's main training partners, Jake Heffernan, who's a regional fighter there in Texas. And one of the things that I found really interesting, what he told me, is about how Save Saud has really changed the way they train on a day in, day out basis. Alex basically goes between his home gym and traveling up to Dallas to Fortis MMA there. It was one of the big things, but man, even before I saw the price point on this fight, I was like, man, I really like Alex Morono. That's a lot of price. I was like, whoo, man, I got to pay a premium to get the Alex Morono.
Yeah, same. I really like Alex Morono, but the price tag is going to scare plenty of people off. Now, let's say, for instance, that he's 20% owned. That means that 80% of the field is a little too afraid to roster Alex Morono. Now, with a fighter in such a smash spot, in my opinion, against Mickey Gall, you could actually gain a lot of leverage on the field by being a little bit overweight to an expensive fighter, right? So like Alex Morono at 9,500, I like him. He has to do a lot in this matchup. I think that he has more potential than a Brendan Allen, because Brendan Allen is fighting a better fighter in Chris Curtis than Alex Morono is fighting in Mickey Gall, right? Like, I think that Morono has the striking advantage over Mickey Gall, who, with his recent work of Joe Schilling over the past couple of years, he can actually throw heavy strikes, but he's not a good striker, and he's going to get out volumed, and he's going to resort to takedowns. He doesn't have the best wrestling. So when he's able to fight a fighter with better striking and somebody that's not going to be, a fish on the mat, I think he's in a tough fight. And I really think that this is a tough fight for Mickey Gall. He could end up going out there, and if any fighter can make it onto somebody's back, they can get a submission win. That's just, if you can scramble correctly and you can get an advantageous position, you can walk away with a victory. The likelihood of that happening in this matchup, I think, is very slim. Morono's grappling, even though it's a strong suit of his skill set, he can get somewhat, lured into some bad positions. But I have to think that Alex Morono, with the teammates around him, the excellent coaching staff, I think he's going to go out there and put a stamp on this and show that Mickey Gall really doesn't belong in there with him. I like Morono a lot at 9,500. I'll probably be level with the field, or depending on the size of my contest, I might take a little bit more of an aggressive approach, but I think Morono gets it done.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things this week you have to look at is those 9,000 options of who can we potentially gain a little bit of a leverage on the field. Maybe people are not getting to, but I mean, look, that may be Brandon Allen just because of price point, but you can spend $100 less to get to Alex Morono. Next up, we got my guy, Coconut Bombs. You know what he wants to do. You know what Coconut Bombs wants to do.
Does he though?
He takes on Dusko here. So this is 7,600 for Maki, 8,600 for Dusko. Look, I don't look, if you're Dusko, I don't think you want to get into, hey, let's just start throwing some bungalows and see who falls first.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a weird fight, right? Because Maki Pitolo, with the nickname of Coconut Bombs, with the personality of a striker, a very strong striker, goes out there and attempts 5 takedowns against Julian Marquez. Actually, lands 5 of 11 takedowns against Julian Marquez. So for being such a striker, yes, Julian Marquez is a big guy for the division and pretty savvy on the feet. But Maki really resorts to his wrestling when things get ugly or he starts to get fatigued or if he wants to switch it up. And I think that could be to his detriment in this matchup against Dusko Todorovic, who I cannot stand how Dusko fights. I truly cannot, because his hands are low. He leans back with his chin up in the air. He's going to get knocked out again, similar to how he got knocked out against Punahele Soriano, because of just his lacking of striking defense and just his fight IQ is terrible. But his skill set is a little bit more well-rounded than Maki Pitolo, where he really has strong grappling in his back pocket, where he's not making critical errors on the mat, where Maki Pitolo will initiate takedowns, will get in good positions. And then when the going gets tough or the scrambles start to happen, he'll leave his neck out there and he'll get exposed in one little sequence. It's happened several times, but 2 to mention, against Julian Marquez and also against Darren Stewart. He does that against Dusko Todorovic, and I think that he could end up getting submitted pretty similar, because it's a very volatile fight. This is going to be a part of my GPP, groups that I'm going to set, because I view this fight as a 100-point fight. Whoever's going to win this, Maki Pitolo, if he goes out there and he says, I'm going to strike and I'm going to test that chin of Dusko Todorovic by catching him when he leans back, trying to replicate that Punahele Soriano, you have a guy in 7,600 who's going to get you 100+ points because of the knockdowns and the crazy just violence that's going to occur in this matchup. But I will say that despite all of Dusko's lapses in judgment and all of his flaws, I'm still picking him to win at 8,600. I think that this could be a breakout performance for him. Because the breakout performance against Daquan Townsend is really his only good feather in his cap thus far in his UFC career.
Of course, this is the Also MMA Strategy Show, and we are sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. With Monkey Knife Fight, you are in charge. You can sign up today over at monkeyknifefight.com. Be sure to use the promo code Awesemo for an instant first match deposit of up to $100. And Pete, I'm looking over at Monkey Knife Fight main event. You knew the total strikes number was going to be a high number because of these two guys. 152.5 for Rob Font. Jose Aldo, 121.5. If this thing goes 5 rounds, I'm leaning on the more side for Rob Font and the less side on Jose Aldo.
I'm going to say more for both. Truthfully, I think this is going to be a tit for tat type of thing where they go and they exchange, and it's going to be a back and forth affair on the feet. I think it's going to be more for both.
Yeah, I think the question to me is we saw how Rob was able to dodge the punches of Cody Garbrandt with that speed. And it's something actually that Rob talked about leading up to this one. He feels like the Cody fight has really helped him out in terms of that one. Then the co-main event, Fiziev, 103.5, Riddell, 80.5. This might be a more on one side, less on the other. Give me more on Riddell, less on Fiziev.
I would totally agree with you. I think it's close. I think it's really close, and you're talking about single digits off one way or another, but I would agree with you.
And of course, be sure to check out monkeyknifefight.com, monkeyknifefight.com. Of course, you can also download their app in the App Store. Be sure to use that promo code also for instant first match deposit of up to $100. Move on. Next up, we got a matchup between Manel Kape and Zhumagulov. 9,400 for Kape, 6,800 for Zhalgas. What's your take, Pete?
Yeah, so I like Manel Kape here. Zhalgas Zhumagulov has been somewhat of a disappointment. He had an explosive win over Jerome Rivera in his last time with a nice submission win. Only scored 94 points in a first round victory, and traditionally he's just not good for DFS. He will attempt takedowns at times. His volume is somewhat lethargic for the division. You would expect a lot more for a flyweight, but Manel Kape doesn't. up until his last performance, it looked like he was going to be a disappointment in the UFC because outside the UFC, he was absolutely incredible. He showcases excellent boxing. He likes to stance switch, so he can strike from either side. He has good wrestling as well when he decides, okay, the round's close, I'm going to change levels and get a takedown. He checks so many boxes for me. I absolutely love Manel Kape. If people are down on him and think that the last performance over Ode Osborne's a fluke because it was competitive until the beautiful flying knee, I'm okay with that. 9,400 though, the price tag, it's just, does he end up getting a finish? He seems somewhat to be okay with sitting back and just winning rounds and banking rounds than being that aggressive finisher. I'm going to say Manel Kape wins this fight pretty handily. It's just for DFS. Does he go out there and get you 100 plus points? I would say most of the time, no, but there aren't too many. I feel good about this fighter on this fight card, and I feel good about this fighter. So be careful, take that how you want, but Manel Kape's going to walk away victorious.
Next up, we got a matchup that literally came together on Monday as Bryan Barberena was flying to Vegas, initially supposed to take on Matt Brown. Of course, Matt Brown out of the fight. And as he got on the plane, he had no idea if he'd have an opponent or not, but he did get an opponent. He's taking on Darian Weeks, 8,400 for Bryan Barberena, 7,800 for Darian Weeks. When you look at the betting side of the equation, it looks like some money's been coming in on Darian Weeks. I had a chance to talk to Darian back in the end of February after you guys' LFA win. He had a daytime job as a barber. He is a boxer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird fight, right? Like, I kind of view this one as a volatile matchup because there are so many unknowns, so many question marks surrounding Bryan Barberena's health and all the injuries throughout his career. He clearly is the UFC vet, and you have a debuting fighter in Weeks here, Darian Weeks, set at 7,800. It's a little pricey for a guy just coming, breaking into the UFC. What has he done to really get an opportunity like this? Well, he's a good striker, but he is only 5-0, and he's fighting an MMA fighter in Bryan Barberena who has 23 MMA fights. So we have to take that into consideration. Darian Weeks does have a solid amateur background. If you want to go back, he has nearly 20 amateur fights, which is a lot more than a lot of people can say. So in addition to that, his boxing experience, I could see why money is starting to come in on this underdog coming, into the UFC in hopes of taking out the UFC vet who's riddled with injuries and hasn't really looked the same in several fights now. But I don't know. I'm going to make a group to get to this, but logic would say that Bryan Barberena, the UFC vet, is just going to be too much for a debuting fighter. If Darian Weeks has any grappling at all, that's the easiest path to victory, is just take Bryan Barberena down. And I don't foresee that happening. And on a striking matchup, that would favor Darian Weeks. So I get it. It's just a little too much too soon. Would you happen to interview Darian Weeks? Is there anything that you can provide about this? Or is there this just seems like a completely volatile matchup where Bryan Barberena on paper should beat the debuting fighter.
Correct.
But I'm very nervous about this matchup.
What concerns me is, Barberena's had the injury issues over the past couple of years. That kind of concerns me. You got, and then of course, he's preparing to take on Matt Brown. Now you got Weeks coming in, making his UFC on short notice. I mean, you talk about the amateur stuff. There's some fighters out there who just don't do amateur fights.
Right. Exactly.
I like the guy I'm talking to.
Yeah. Only kickboxing. Yeah.
I had to confirm this. I'm like, let me pull up Pete's Tapology page. Yeah, Pete never had an MMA amateur fight.
No, just tons of kickboxing.
Yeah, you got started at a young age.
Yeah, exactly. But man, it's a weird fight, right? Where the UFC guy, if you want to look at it black and white, Bryan Barberena is going to get a victory at 8,400. Okay, the price point's perfect. Does he get a finish? I don't know. Does he really go the takedown route? Not really. That's an unknown, right? Like Bryan Barberena comes from a very, very strong camp, and you go from fighting Matt Brown to Darian Weeks. I think he would have lost to Matt Brown personally. I think Matt Brown probably would have destroyed him, but MMA math doesn't work like that. And the debuting hungry fighter could literally put hands on Barberena and walk away with a victory. So I'm lost on this fight, Jason. I'm going to lead you with this.
And Barberena can find himself in the brawls. I want to see what the weigh-ins look like first off.
Okay.
That's the first part of the equation. Like, what has Weeks been in training? Has he been in hardcore training? I mean, that it's a lot of unknowns right now. On Thursday, I would say Barberena.
Okay, I would agree with you. And this is like a last minute patch this fight up type of thing where you're gonna have to take a wait and see approach. But I would lean towards the UFC veteran, but come weigh-in day, come fight day, that may completely change. So this is the one fight I'm lost on.
And as Joshua mentions in the chat, there's not a lot of tape out there on Darian Weeks. There is not a lot of tape out there. Next up, I mentioned about there was a fight that I said to Pete, can you talk me off this underdog? And that underdog is Jeremiah Wells taking on Jake Matthews. Jeremiah Wells, 7,100. Jake Matthews, 9,100. Wells comes from a great team. Jake Matthews is a guy that, I think at one time, I think we thought that ceiling being extremely high. This is one of those ones that as I was looking at price points, I was like, man, Jeremiah Wells is really tempting.
Jeremiah Wells is absolutely tempting. And Jake Matthews, I hold in a high regard. I think that he's exceptional. I think he has very, very good boxing. You saw that against Sean Brady at times. You've seen that in the past against other fighters where he can go out there and have good combinations. But his best path to victory for beating a lot of these fighters is taking them down, getting in top position, whether it's incorporating a submission finish or strong ground and pound and control time. Jake Matthews is an amazing fighter. Like I really like him. And I think that he has tons. He's so young still that I think that he has tons of promise within the division. Jeremiah Wells is that kind of wild card on the card where when he hits people, they just don't react well. And he's coming from one of the hottest teams out there in Renzo Gracie Philly. And I've been saying this for weeks and months and years that Daniel Gracie at Renzo Gracie Philly has a strong stable of fighters that are kind of flying under the radar. You saw that with Sean Brady. You saw that with Pat Sabatini. And now you have Jeremiah Wells to really add to that list. So it's not me talking you off of Jeremiah Wells because of the underdogs. He has some of the best upside. When you knock out Warlley Alves in the second round and score 96 points at 7,000 flat, I think that you can knock out plenty of people. And I know that Warlley has some susceptibility to getting cracked, but I think that Jake Matthews, if he doesn't approach this with, I'm going to use my wrestling, he could be a sitting duck for some of these big, wild combinations of Jeremiah Wells. So it's a tricky fight. This is another one where I will be making a group and prioritizing it just because I feel like if Matthews gets top position over most fighters in the division, he's a very, very tough fight to deal with. But I do like the Jeremiah Wells call at 7,100, and I'm okay with getting to him. I like him. I'll side with Jeremiah Wells slightly.
I'm siding with Jeremiah Wells a little bit here. I mean, as you mentioned throughout the show, there's so many 7,000 options that you can look at here. And that's where you got to use Fancy Crunch to your advantage with them in groups and figure out how to come up with your lineups. Next up, we got a female matchup. We got Cheyanne Vlismas taking on Mallory Martin. Cheyanne, 9,000, 7,200 for Mallory. And of course, Cheyanne was supposed to fight 2 weeks ago against Luke Boomy, pulled out of the fight due to testing positive for COVID. And here's a concern for me. This is from 2 weeks ago. She appeared on MMA Junkie Radio. She's asked about it. Quote, I'm still not 100%. My fight is now 2 weeks away. It's attacked my lungs pretty good. So basically, I'm taking this fight, just trying to heal up and go out there and do my thing. Luckily, the UFC is working with me. I'm going to see a doctor on Monday. I'm going to get an inhaler, taking all the breathing treatments I can do. This is definitely one of the craziest things I've ever done in my life, but I have all the confidence in myself to go out there and just beat her ass and go home. Concerns
amazing fight IQ, amazing IQ in general, huh? This is
just remember, she will follow you home, bitch.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well,
still one of the greatest lines. Actually, atop that line, if you saw it this week, Brandon Figueiredo calling Davison Figueiredo his best sponsor ever.
Yes,
because how he's bought his house, he's bought his car, and so he's down for a third fight. Like that is a great line.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I love Brandon Morono. This is a tricky one because on the feet, Cheyanne can pose a lot of problems for people because of her volume and good combinations. It's those intangibles and the X factors that you brought up that really just completely make me hesitate about rostering her at all and just going the complete opposite side just because I'll tell you what, when you have COVID and you are symptomatic, it definitely takes a toll on your body, and it definitely will zap your energy and your cardio. Now, when that happens, you're probably not training consistently. Or if you are, you're just completely just selfish. Imagine just training with everybody when getting everybody infected. But anyways, I think that that's a big deal for cardio. And in addition to that, I know that she's going through some personal issues. Like, I think she just recently had a divorce, which you don't want to really read into too much personal things, but you put all that together, you put this bad decision of taking a fight on short notice when you're not 100%. This is either the best poker player in the world in Cheyanne Vlismas, or she's just completely foolish. And I'm going to lean towards that she's completely foolish. Mallory Martin, not the most skilled fighter within the division, does have very good wrestling, can negate the striking of Vlismas by getting in top position. She just needs to avoid submissions. And that's been the Achilles heel of Mallory Martin, is the fight IQ when it hits the mat. Gianni Roba, okay, she got submitted. Can't really falter for that. Poliana Viana got submitted in that situation. So against some pretty talented fighters, she can get taken out of there via submission. I think with everything being said, I'm going to favor Mallory Martin in the fight, even though I don't think she's the better fighter. But at 7,200, with all that being said about Vlismas, I just can't trust her. It's a no thank you for me.
Yeah, the comment there, and of course Joshua brings up also in an interview with MMA Junkie, she knew that if Martin approached her on the street, she'd fight her.
Yeah, I mean
that's.
Well, no
I have to question the people in her inner circle of why rush to get a fight. Now very well could mean she needs money. That could very well be the case. But it's like, man, you know, it's like, I don't know if you saw the interview Kevin Lee gave Eric Hawani yesterday, where he's basically sitting there saying, you got to take what's best for you, what's not best for the promotion. And I look at Cheyanne here and say, recover from COVID, then come back. But this kind of screams to me that she probably needs money.
Yeah, I mean, you get chewed up and spit out in the UFC all the time, and you've seen it happen to the best fighters in the world, where they do the best thing for the company. They try to be a company woman or man, taking tough fights, and next thing you know, you're on a losing skid. And besides Sam Alvey, they kick you to the curb, and Sam Alvey is just winless, and like, I mean, it's crazy what his losing streak is. For some reason, I don't know, he still has the job, but I like Sam, but it's pretty crazy how some of these other fighters get cut, and you have fighters like that not getting cut.
Yeah, I know, it's absolutely crazy. Let's move on to next guys that, you know, let's just say they work hard in the gym. Alonzo Menifield and William Knight. Alonzo Menifield 8,700, William Knight 7,500. I mean, if this thing hits the third round, I have no idea who would have the better gas tank. I do think Alonzo Menifield is a better fighter, though.
Yeah, I mean, this is easily one of the hardest fight cards to play MMA DFS. This is going to be, you could either just completely fill your lineups with underdogs, or take a betting approach and target underdogs in most of these fights, and you'll probably walk out with some profit. You have an action figure against a superhero in this matchup of Alonzo Menifield against William Knight. And William Knight has some crazy power, and when he touches people, they go to sleep. His chin being up in the air is going to get him in trouble one day. It really is. His chin just is straight up in the air. He leans back. He's a smaller frame fighter for the division, but he's absolutely a muscle shark. Like, he's the Sean Shirk of this division, where he's just completely ripped. Alonzo Menifield is the bigger guy, with the less grappling credentials and less grappling skill. But I think that his explosiveness can definitely get a fighter in Knight out of there if he chains together the correct combination. This is another fight, right, where I can't see this being a snoozer. I think that somebody's getting knocked out or finished one way or another. Alonzo Menifield picking up a submission win, not going to happen again. I think that he's going to go out there and try to keep this on the feet, keep it at distance, pick apart the smaller frame William Knight, who should look to change levels and put Alonzo Menifield on his back. Completely volatile matchup, but I'm leaning Alonzo Menifield at 8,700. I know that William Knight's from my area. But yeah, I don't have the blinders on. I think Alonzo Menifield's going to get it done.
That's the one thing in this business. We got to take our blinders off, even though we
Yeah.
have those, those friendships with people in this industry. I call it like we see it. Of course, one of the things that Pete and I love to see on Fight Night. Hope I get to see this on Saturday night when I'm in Atlanta. Love to see those winning screenshots. And of course, if you want to get into the Awesemo Hall of Fame, you got to be rocking that Awesemo avatar on your DFS profile. You can get that over at awesemo.com/avatar. Place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants. Tweet your win. So at Awesemo HOF, you win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Only one free month can be awarded to a user per calendar year. And congratulations to all the guys. You're going to see those rolling up on the screen as you got Erica coming down in first place, taking down $4,000 there over on DraftKings. Also, there you see a winner there taking down first and 13th, 150th, and win several prizes there along the lines. Also, Dre taking down second place there in a contest. Corey taking down a contest there over at NBA, winning $5,000. Also, had Jordan Weber taking down third place in an NBA contest. Of course, you got to check out all the great NBA content we have over here at awesemo.com. Start off with the Slate Starter podcast that gets your morning started. Then we got the strategy show. And then, of course, Deeper Dive Live Before Lock. Also, check out the Deeper Dive article that is free over awesemo.com that Adam puts out every single day. So be sure to check that out. Next up, we got 3 more fights here to break down before we get out of here on this edition of the show. We got Claudio Puellas taking on Chris Grutzmacher. This is Pete's favorite fight, the 8,000, 8,200 fight. Chris Grutzmacher, the 8,200 side of the equation. And I like the durability of Grutzmacher in this spot.
When I see these salaries, like my blood pressure raises. Like it really does. Like, I don't know. I wish they just never existed because I have the most difficult time with it, admittedly. In this matchup, I think that a lot of people are going to have the Grutzmacher blinders on. And I think it's because he has looked good, right? Like beating Rafa Garcia, I think means something because Rafa Garcia, he's a talented enough striker, but it really resorts to takedowns to get victories, but doesn't have the best cardio. He's fighting a grappling specialist in Claudio Puellas, who has been training at Sanford MMA. And admittedly, you guys know that I have Sanford MMA bias. I absolutely love that team, that gym. I can't really say the same about Chris Grutzmacher. I mean, his team doesn't mean that he can't get victories in the UFC, but he doesn't have the most talented training partners, whereas Claudio Puellas is training with phenomenal UFC, Bellator, all these high-level athletes on the daily. I like Claudio Puellas here. He needs to take down Chris Grutzmacher, and he needs to implement a ton of control time because Chris Grutzmacher on the feet is a nightmare with his pressure. He will walk you down, he'll pick you apart, and he will grind out a victory. And that's really what he can do to a lot of these fighters within this division. It's just his Achilles heel is his grappling and his wrestling and getting caught in submissions. And a guy in Claudio Puellas, I think, is a guy that could end up getting Grutzmacher out of there. Not the biggest name. Puellas is definitely not the biggest name that Grutzmacher has faced. You look at Chaz Skelly, Alexander Hernandez, Joe Lozon, Davi Hamosh, like all legitimate competition. But that doesn't mean that a guy in Claudio Puellas, who has similar skill sets to some of those fighters, can't go out there and implement the correct game plan. So I am leaning Puellas in this matchup, but I would much rather have this fight than I would probably say the Rafael Fiziev, Brad Riddell fight in a similar salary situation of 8,300 and 7,900.
Next up, we got a matchup that late replacement here, Jared Vanderaa stepping up here on short notice. 6,900 taking on Azat Mirzakhanov, 9,300. What concerns me about this one is Azat was going to be fighting at light heavyweight. He is a light heavyweight. And now you're taking on a very big heavyweight where he is going to have a noticeable size disadvantage. This one, Vanderaa will have a 9-inch reach advantage in this one.
This fight card is just bananas. It's like a smoker type of field where like, oh, you got opponents dropping out. Yeah. Well, we can patch it a matchup that's a weight class higher where you're going to have a 50-pound weight disadvantage against your opponent. Are you down? You want to fight or not? Yeah, I'll take the fight. No problem at all.
Are you a fighter or not?
Yeah, right. Okay? That line right there will definitely make people want to take the fight. And it's just like, oh my God, what a terrible decision to take a fight in the heavyweight weight class, because it's not a matter of being able to compete on the feet, right? It's a matter of if Jared Vanderaa implements the correct game plan, pins you against the cage, wears you down because you're 50 pounds lighter, gets on top of you, God forbid, somehow. That's a lot of weight to deal with. So Jared Vanderaa is in my underdog long shot pool just because of the weight and not because of his skill, because I don't really think he's all that good. But in top position, he can put some crazy damage on you. Murzakanov is coming from a very good gym in K Dojo tribe where I actually know the coaches and they're amazing. Like they have good striking and some really good grappling and wrestling. It's the weight disadvantage that's really like making me hesitate here. But I think that the quick combinations of Murzakanov probably gets him the victory more often than not. It's like a 60-40. There's no reason why it should be 9,300, 6,900. Given the weight disparity. So I'm still thinking that Murzakanov gets it done, probably hits Vanderaa with a combination or two, sits him down, follows up with some fast hands, and the speed's going to be a crazy difference maker in this matchup. Vanderaa will throw one strike to 5 of Murzakanov. So I'm picking Murzakanov to win, but like I said, Vanderaa, long shot pool, no problem at all.
Opening fight of the night, you got Louis Smolka taking on Vince Morales, 8,500 for Louis Smolka, 7,700 for Vince Morales. And, I had Vince Morales on my podcast this week, and big part of the conversation is about how the UFC PI essentially has rebuilt him over the last year after he had that injury. But when we talk about what we've seen from Vince inside the UFC cage, I don't think we can forget what Chris Gutierrez did with him with the leg kicks. And
right.
If you're Louis Smolka, how are you not emphasizing that as part of your game plan?
I mean, you would think, right? But I don't think that Louis Smolka is nearly the striker that Chris Gutierrez is. I think Chris Gutierrez is one of the brightest spots and brightest surprises that the UFC has had. I like him in general. And I think that he's going to have a pretty successful career in the UFC. He's already started with one. Louis Smolka has been inconsistent. He's kind of alternated wins and losses throughout his UFC career. He won one fight, he'll look amazing. Next fight, he'll make a bad decision, get caught in a submission. But the fighters that he's losing via submission, Casey Kenny, Matt Schnell, and Brandon Morono, I think that's pretty skilled company in regards to grappling. All three of those guys, I would say, are submission specialists, minus Casey Kenny, who I think that's a little not fluky, but he has amazing wrestling throughout his entire life. He just decides not to use it. So I think that kind of surprised some people. But Louis Smolka, he's able to compete against some of the top fighters within the division. And, against Mateus Nicolau, Tim Elliott, Ray Borg, he wasn't submitted in those fights. So it's not like where it's just an absolute Achilles heel and a guy in Vince Morales who might have some sneaky jiu-jitsu. I know he talked about it in some interviews, which kind of surprised me. I don't think it's something that he can really target against the Louis Smolka. I think that Louis Smolka checks more boxes for me. As long as he doesn't get into a firefight and just stay on the outside. I think if he mixes it up, he's the better MMA fighter. So at 8,500, I like him. It's just, do I like him more than some of these other fighters? Probably not. I don't know how often this fight ends up in the optimal lineup, but it's Louis Smolka for me.
Of course, before we get into our straight up fight picks, be sure to give us a thumbs up right here on YouTube, or if you listen to us on the podcast version of the show, leave us a rating and a review on our Awesemo MMA feed there, whether you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, be sure to subscribe to Awesemo right here on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so when a show is live here on the channel. Let's give our straight up picks for this one, not DFS related. I'll hit you with your first, Pete. Give me Font, give me Fiziev. Crute, don't feel great about that one. Santos, God, I want to say Chris Curtis, but I'll go Brandon Allen. Morono, give me Maki Pitolo, Manel Kape. I'll go Brian Barberena, Jeremiah Wells, Cheyanne, Vlismas, even though I don't feel good about that one.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. Give me Minifield, Grismacher. I gotta go Vanderaa because of the size, and give me Vince Morales in the upset.
Oh, man. Okay. Non-DFS related. I'm going absolute homer pick. Rob Font, Rafael Fiziev, Jimmy Crute, Santos, Brendan Allen, Morono, Todorovic, Manel Kape, Brian Barberena as of now, Jeremiah Wells, Mallory Martin, Alonzo Menifield, Claudio Puelles, Murzakanov, and Luis Smolka. It is an ugly week, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, fish on this question, Joshua goes, I know it's not MMA, but you can't talk Frank Gore versus Teron Williams. Of course, I'll be here 2 weeks here in my hometown of Tampa. Here's about the only thing I can really say about that fight. Teron Williams is a co-owner of Force MMA. He's trained in combat sports for a long time, so I would give Teron Williams the edge in that one.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah.
I don't pay attention to these circus fights, but I will side with the football player and Frank Gore.
Just get you down to Tampa, make you go to that fight.
Yeah, right. Imagine. Yeah, that's what I need to do. I need to go down all the way to Tampa. Seeing you would be a bonus, but to go see that fight, are you kidding me?
We'll get you a ticket.
Yeah, thanks. Pay for my flight too, and I'll consider it.
Ooh, flights are pretty expensive these days, bro.
Yeah,
flights are
exactly.
pretty expensive these days. I'm just telling you, man. As someone who travels a lot, yeah, they're expensive these days.
Yeah, forget that.
But that is going to do it for the Awesemo MMA Strategy Show. Of course, coming up next will be the NHL Strategy Shows. Guys, he's ready for tonight's NHL slate. Pete will be back on Saturday as Greg will be filling in for me on Live Before Lock as I'll be in Atlanta for Bucks and Falcons. So until next week, this has been the Awesemo MMA Strategy Show. Have a good day, everybody.